We're very grateful to have Matt help me here real quick. It is pronounced Matera. Is that correct?
Yes, you nailed it. That's
All
correct.
Right, good. I want to make sure I got it straight. Thank you, really, for your time today. You have an unbelievable following down there in Tampa Bay and for the Buccaneers. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing each and every day.
Yeah, so I'm a beat writer and digital content creator for PewterReport.com. I'm essentially the vice president of the company, second in command. And Pewter Report's been around for over 25 years now. I've been lucky enough to be a part of them for about 4.5, 5 years now. So I've seen some bad, some great, and then kind of tapering off right now. But we have a website, started out as a magazine, then transitioned over to a website where we have content every single day, a lot of inside information. We're at every practice, every press conference, and we have a podcast that goes 4 times a week on our YouTube channel as well, the Pewter Report podcast. So just anything Tampa Bay Buccaneers that you need, we are the website to go to for it.
Great stadium, great fan base. I've been there dozens and dozens of times throughout my career, and obviously huge expectations when the season started. Brady retires. He decides he's going to come back. Bruce Arians is no longer going to be the coach. Todd Bowles takes over. Let's just walk through a little bit at a time if you have some time. We know what the team's record is. We know the way they've played, and we'll circle back to that in a minute as it pertains to this weekend's matchup with the Bengals. But the whole Arians stepping aside, Bowles thing coming in, how has that been?
Yeah, it's really interesting, the timeline in general. I vividly remember going to the NFL owners meetings in West Palm Beach in March. And typically we're there, we get to speak to the owner, the GM, and the head coach, which at the time was Bruce Arians. And they said, oh, Bruce isn't going to be there. It's a personal matter. So initially we all thought I hope everything's okay. Then we find out a couple of days later that he is essentially retiring. He now works in the front office for the Bucs as essentially a consultant. And he gave the job to Todd Bowles. And that was part of his whole plan, was a succession plan. He wanted to give an opportunity for his assistant coaches around him, whether it's Todd Bowles. Byron Leftwich was getting some head coaching consideration, most notably with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So he wanted to make sure that everything was in place for the guys around him to get elevated into a higher position. Now, with that said, the entire coaching staff has been here since Bruce Arians got there in 2019. So in terms of getting to know the players, understanding the scheme and the system, that really wasn't anything different because they had been there since 2019. It's mostly the same players. Sure, you get turnover every year, and there's the draft, and there's free agency, but the core nucleus of players were still there for the Bucs. The offensive players needed to know Todd Bowles a little bit more, but nonetheless, most of it was relatively the same, which kind of makes this season even more disappointing, where sure, there's a new head coach, but it's a guy that you've known for multiple years now.
Is it safe to say, Matt, that the single biggest issue, and whether it's guys that left through free agency, whether it was retirement, whether it's been injuries during the course of the year, the offensive line is the one unit of this team that's been in the most disarray? Is that fair to say, or am I wrong on that?
I would say it's pretty fair. I would say either the offensive line or really, more importantly, the play calling by Byron Leftwich. Now, I'll start with the offensive line. They suffered 2 huge blows. Well, Ali Marpet, their perennial Pro Bowl left guard. Well, he should have been a Pro Bowler for most of his career, but the Bucs weren't successful, so he only made his first Pro Bowl last season. He decided to retire, but he was, without question, their best offensive lineman. And then Ryan Jensen, he's their tone setter. He's the nasty type of offensive lineman that'll get in your face and set the tempo. He injured his knee on the second day of training camp and has not been able to return. So that's been a catastrophic injury there. So there was a ton of turnover. And, of course, their right guard, Alex Kappa, he signed with the Bengals. So They lost another starting offensive lineman. And then so you have a new offensive guard. They went with the rookie Luke Gedeke, and that just didn't pan out. He struggled heavily. Shaq Mason's over there at right guard, and he's been playing solid, but as a unit, cohesively, offensive line hasn't been great. Tom Brady hasn't trusted them as much, so he's getting rid of the ball quickly, and that's why you're suffering from the chunk plays down the field, which the Bucs were fantastic at last season. And now you don't have as many options. Julio Jones has been solid lately, but he obviously is dealing with injuries all of the time, just popped up on the injury report again. And Russell Gage, their other big free agent signing, he just hasn't lived up to the hype. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury since training camp, missed a couple of games, just came back 2 weeks ago. So they've been getting a lot of underperformance from their offensive line and their wide receivers. And their play calling has just been extremely predictable by Byron Leftwich. When you have all the talent that they had in 2020 and 2021, whether it was Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski, you can get away by just out-talenting other teams, but that hasn't been the case this year, and the offense really hasn't adjusted well enough where they keep coming up with the same plays. Defenses are calling it out, saying, here comes the screen, here comes this play, and that's kind of led to the turmoil that's been a team that averaged 30 points per game last season at one point of the season, and now they're barely getting to 17, 18.
I know you can't get in a guy's head, but we talked about this very early in the season with Joe Burrow. You know, the offensive line with the Bengals, they have 4 brand new starters from the team that went to the Super Bowl a year ago. The only carryover was a starting left tackle. Zach Taylor decided not to play those guys a single snap together during the preseason. And in the first 2 games of the regular season, they give up 13 sacks. And, you know, it started to at least look like Burrow might be getting a little gun shy. And hell, who could blame him, right? Do you think, when I watch Tampa Bay play, and I've watched them play a lot, it looks to me that there's a chance Brady would have good reason to feel a little gun shy. Do you feel that way at all or no?
Yeah, I think he's getting rid of the ball a lot quicker than he has during his time in Tampa. He's more willing to just dump a pass off to, a tight end in the flat or a running back coming out of the backfield, then hold on to it for another second or two to take the deep shot down the field to Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or even Scotty Miller, who made the infamous catch at the end of halftime in the NFC Championship game against the Packers 2 seasons ago. He's getting rid of the ball quickly, and typically that's a good thing. In the past, Brady has helped the offensive line by getting rid of the ball so quickly, but in an odd way, he's almost throwing it too fast where the Bucs can't get these chunk plays down the field. They're relying heavily on the screen game, and that just hasn't worked to perfection. Part of it is they keep going to Chris Godwin, who's a great player, but he's also coming back from a serious ACL injury that he got hurt right around this time last season. And, he's recovered enough to be able to play, but I wouldn't say he's fully 100%. So Brady just not trusting his offensive line. And I don't blame him. He's 45 years old. Getting hit hurts, especially at his age. And he doesn't want to take a lot of hits. So he's more likely to get rid of the ball quickly. And he wanted to rely on a solid run game, but the Bucs have one of the lowest rushing yards per game in the season out of anyone in the league. So haven't been able to rely on the run game, and Brady's kind of been asked to do it all, and at this point he's just not able to because he can't go down the field.
All right, I read some news yesterday about, Wirfs was out on the practice field at least yesterday. He's not doing all the stuff that they need him to be able to do to be ready to go this week, but they're hoping that is the case. Donovan Smith, I believe, basically in the same kind. Where are they with the offensive line on who you think is actually going to play this week?
Yeah, I don't think Tristan Wirfs is going to be able to play again, which is really tough for the Bucs. He's without question their best offensive lineman. He plays right tackle. He was an All-Pro last season. He's well on his way to being the best offensive lineman in the Buccaneers' history, and he's only in his 3rd season, so we all think very highly of him. Donovan Smith, he struggled heavily this year, and before Tom Brady got there in 2020, the memo on Donovan Smith was that, he's a solid player, but sometimes his technique just gets in the way and he allows a sack if he could just stick with it a little bit more. And then his game turned around. I don't know if it's, the Brady magic and people just wanting to play well for Tom Brady, but this season he's committed a lot of extremely costly holding penalties. It negated a touchdown on Sunday against the 49ers. If you watch the Monday night game against the Saints, before they scored the game-winning touchdown with Rashad White, they scored a touchdown with Chris Godwin, but that was brought back because of a holding penalty on Donovan Smith. So he's having not just bad penalties, but penalties that are literally costing them points, where points have been at a premium for the Bucs this season. So Todd Bowles was asked about if he's considered making a change at left tackle, and he said they've considered everything, but Donovan Smith is their best option right now. That's partially because Kristen Wirfs is injured right now, so their top backup offensive tackle is already starting with Wirfs out. Wirfs should probably be out another week or two. He was out there, not in uniform or actually practicing, but just being out there with the teammates is a step in the right direction, and they need him desperately in the worst way, because even at a 6-7 record, they're fighting to win the division and could potentially host a playoff game, as crazy as it sounds, and they'll definitely need him for the final stretch.
All right, well, let's talk about then the matchup this weekend. Bengals coming to town. They were a Super Bowl team a year ago. They were 4-4. Now they've ripped off 5 straight wins. They're starting to look like a bona fide contender to get back to the Super Bowl again, yet the Bengals have their fair share of injuries. Nobody in the league wants to hear about it because everybody has their own. What's the feeling? What's the expectation? Knowing that, Tampa Bay very much is trying to fight its way into the playoff spot, as you just mentioned a moment ago. It's a desperate team for sure. What's the feeling about this matchup this weekend down your way?
The feeling for a lot of, Bucs media and Bucs fans is, I hope they don't get debilitating and beat up again like they did against the 49ers. They lost 35-7 to the San Francisco 49ers to Brock Purdy, their starting quarterback, Mr. Irrelevant from last season. They made a rookie quarterback in his first career game look like an all-pro. So, you allowed that many points, and I don't want to knock the defense too much, because for most of the season, it's been the Bucs defense that has kept them in games. But the Bucs offense has been so bad at this point that you can't, even with Tom Brady and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, you can't expect them to get into a shootout with anyone, especially the Bengals with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And I know some of the other receivers are potentially injured right now, but still, if you have Burrow and Jamar Chase, that almost might be good enough against this Bucs team that is struggling to score points. Like, if you score 20 against the Bucs, you probably have a good chance of winning. So I think a lot of Bucs fans and media are just hoping that Tampa Bay doesn't get blown out again, because they're not going to be able to go stride for stride with the Bengals. And I know you don't want to talk about injuries, but the defense, the one saving grace for the Bucs, with the exception of last week, they're missing their best safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., their other starting corner, Jamel Dean, who you could argue has been the best corner this season. He's not going to play. He's in a walking boot right now. And Todd Bowles said that he's doubtful that Vita Vea, their nose tackle, their best interior defensive lineman that leads the team with 6.5 sacks, he's doubtful to play. So you're talking about the 3 best players, or 2 of the 3 best players on the Bucs defense, not being available to try to shut down Joe Burrow. Could be tough sledding once again for the Bucs.
I know you don't have a crystal ball, Matt, but whether the Buccaneers get into the playoffs or whether they don't, do you think Tom Brady's a quarterback of the Buccaneers next year?
Personally, I don't. I think Tom Brady will continue to play football in the NFL, but I don't think it'll be with the Bucs. I think just seeing the writing on the wall, what's happened with the Bucs this season, I'm not saying there's complete turmoil within the organization, but clearly something just isn't right with the offense, whether it's Byron Leftwich, whether it's, communication. I mean, him and Mike Evans haven't been on the same page, which is just mind-boggling to say, because this was a quarterback-wide receiver tandem that connected for 14 touchdowns last season. That was Mike Evans' career best and a franchise best. Now he only has 3 this season, and they can't seem to connect on the deep ball at all. I just think there's a different viewpoint in how the Bucs offense looks. I think Brady would like a little bit more structure, where the Bucs coaching staff is kind of just saying, all right, here, Tom, here you go. Do whatever you want. I think there's a misconception that everyone thinks that Tom Brady wants to be the Peyton Manning type of guy that comes in and changes every single play and will call plays and do this formation. Brady really only calls the plays when they're in an up-tempo, no-huddle situation late in the half or late in the game. And that's honestly where the Bucs have been the best, is when Brady is calling the plays, which goes back to their issues with their offensive coordinator, Byron Leftwich. So I think one way you could convince him to stay is that if Byron Leftwich is let go at the end of the season and they bring in an offensive coordinator to Brady's liking. But ultimately, I think he's ready to move on, play for another team that has a little bit more structure, a little bit more of weapons on both sides of the ball on offense and defense. So I think he keeps playing, just not with the Bucs.
All right, are you in the prediction business, Matt? You making a prediction on this game, or is that not your cup of tea?
Yeah, we have a weekly story on Fridays where we give our prediction in the game. I haven't come up with a total score yet, but I'm definitely picking the Bengals to win this one again because I don't think that the Bucs offense can keep up with what Cincinnati can do on the offensive side of the ball. The Bucs defense just doesn't get turnovers anymore. They don't get interceptions, and that's what stopped their defense from being great. They're good right now, but they're not great because they're not creating enough turnovers. So I'm gonna say the Bengals win this one. If I'm going to throw out a score, I would say Bengals 27, Bucs 14. They just don't score a lot. I don't see that changing on Sunday.
All right, look, last thing, and I know you watch a lot of football, not just Tampa Bay Buccaneers football, but Tampa Bay is one of the few teams in the league that after this Sunday will have played the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Bengals. And most people feel like those are the top three contenders. I know a lot of people put Baltimore in that group, but with all of their issues at quarterback and lack thereof health at quarterback, who knows? If you had to pick one of those three teams to go to the Super Bowl, which one would you pick?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs because they're all three teams, their offenses are incredible, but I think what Patrick Mahomes has been able to do, especially since they lost Tyreek Hill, and it looks like that their offense hasn't really missed a beat. I think that's really impressive what they've done. The Bills are just, again, a very talented team, but I think they're so reliant on Josh Allen, where Josh Allen has to be great every single week. And if he's not great, then the team suffers a little bit. I will say I think the Bills probably have the best defense when fully healthy, but, their safety got hurt. Von Miller got hurt. I know the Chiefs defense struggled against the Broncos last week, but they seem to turn it up in, the big crunch time moments. So I'm going to pick the Kansas City Chiefs. Wouldn't rule out the Bengals either. Obviously, Joe Burrow's a fascinating player, and the defense probably deserves more credit than most people give it. But if I have to pick one, I'm picking the Chiefs.
Okay. I mean, you're well aware, Matt. I mean, you're an educated guy. Bengals have beaten the Chiefs 3 times in this calendar year.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's absolutely true. But it's tough to argue that point. I would just say try beating Mahomes a 4th time. I think that's
okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. That's a great point. Matt, really appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for joining us, and the best of luck on everything, and an early Merry Christmas to you and your family.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on. Merry Christmas to you as well, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. You do the same. Looking forward to the Buccaneers and the Bengalis. How about that?
He's good. He's good.
He's great. Guy's great.